Sveiki. Sveiki prisijungę prie transliacijos ar žiūrintis įrašą vėliau. I will say a short introduction in Lithuanian before switching to English. Džiaugiuosi galėdama šiandien pristatyti Volodymyrą Veštaką, architektą, industrinio dizaino kūrėją iš Ukrainos. Kaip ir jau turbūt žinote, Volodymyr šiandien pasakos apie sovietmečio urbanistinių praktikų sąveiką su moderniu gyvenimo būdu, pristatydamas CHARKIVSKO masyvo atvejį. Paskaita vyks anglų kalba, tad prieš užleisdama ekraną Volodymyrui noriu priminti, kad tai yra viena iš paskaitų lydinčių Vilniaus muziejaus parodą Kas į viršulus, kuri vyksta Viršuliškėse iki Liepos 31 dienos. Parodos lankymas nemokamas, kviečiame apsilankyti. Ir tai dar nėra paskutinė paskaita. Lygiai po savaitės kviečiame atvykti į Viršuliškes, kur šį kartą į gyvą susitikimą, kur apie holistinę visą apimančią daugiabučių renovaciją kalbės Lietuvos architektų sąjungos pirmininkė Rūta Lytanaitė. Ir Birželio 30 ir Liepos 9 dieną kviesime į ekskursijas, tad sekite informaciją. Ir taip pat norėčiau padėkoti kultūros vadybininkė Oksanai Dumai, kuri padėjo suorganizuoti šią paskaitą. Ir paskaitos metu ir po jos kviečiame užduoti klausimus pranešėjų komentarų skiltyje po transliaciją. Ir po paskaitos juos pagarsinsiu ir pranešėjas atsakys. Tai galima rašyti ir lietuviškai, ir angliškai. I'll turn to English now. So welcome everyone. I'm very happy to present our speaker of today's lecture, Volodymyr Veštako, Ukrainian architect and industrial designer, who will start his lecture in a minute on the synergy between urbanist practices of the socialist era and the modern consumer's lifestyle in Kyjive. And I would like to thank culture manager Oksanai Dumai, who helped organize this lecture. And it is no coincidence that Volodymyr will talk about Soviet urbanism, as this lecture is part of the events related to the exhibition that we currently hold in Viršuliškės, Kas į viršulus, which is about one Soviet-built district here in Vilnius. Those who are in Vilnius, I encourage you to visit. And finally, we will have a Q&A session after the lecture, so you can write the questions to the comment sections below the broadcast window, both in Lithuanian and English, and during the presentations or afterward, and we will talk about them in the discussion that will follow. So, okay, Volodymyr, now the floor or the screen is yours, and welcome.
Hello. Hi. Hello, everyone. My name is Volodymyro Veštako. I'm very thankful for the Museum of Vilnius for inviting me to make this lecture today. And before I start, I also want to say that I'm very thankful to the people of Lithuania for the help that we are getting for this last more than 100 days now. We really feel it here. And there's not enough words to express our gratitude to the people of Lithuania in these hard times. So now to the lecture. I hope you can see my screen now.
Yes, we can see it perfectly.
Okay. And Kyjive, I also wanted to say, if you feel this time to ask some question during the lecture, please feel free to do it. I think it will be more interesting to answer them right on the spot.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, so everyone who's listening, you can write them as Volodymyr said during. So, and I will then interrupt you with your permission.
Yeah, sure. Thank you again. One very important disclaimer. So I was asked to prepare this lecture about the Kharkivsky district in Kyiv, actually to choose a district in Kyiv, a depressive one. And believe me, there are a lot of depressive districts to choose from in Kyiv. So I chose this one because this is like the extreme point of what I will be talking about of this dramatic meeting of socialist era architecture with the today's consumerist lifestyle that we have. So I decided to, this is actually a district that nobody's visiting too often because, as it said, it's quite a depressive one. Not many points of interest there. People usually go there just to sleep. It's called sleeping massive in Ukrainian, and we have lots of those. So I went there a few days ago to make some photos, and I was a little bit disappointed. It's not as depressing as I remembered it first, because it's the beginning of summer now in Kyiv, you know, and it's a beautiful time. So even the CHARKIVSKO Massiv now looks much better than it can. And also a lot of people left Kyiv because of the war, and not many of them are still back. So I please ask you, when you see a car in my pictures, just mentally try to multiply those cars by 10 to get the actual picture. So to understand what is CHARKIVSKO Massiv, you need to understand what is Kyiv. So Kyiv is the city, 7th biggest city in Europe, as far as I remember, by its population of 3 million people, 839 square kilometers. So I need to ask, do you see the pointer of my mouse when I move it?
I'm not sure. I don't think so.
Right now? No, you don't see when I move the mouse?
No, not really.
Okay, then I'll try to explain what's happening without it. So this is the map of Kyiv. Kyiv is divided by Dnipro River. To understand the scale, the Dnipro River is really wide. Like in the center of Kyiv, it's around 1 kilometer wide. On the right bank, so on the left part of the screen, is the center of Kyiv. On the right part of the screen is the left bank, is the part of Kyiv which was developed after the war. And CHARKIVSKO Massiv is located in the lower right part of the screen now, on the south eastern part of Kyiv. So this is the historical part of Kyiv. And you can see that it is developed like many Western cities. It is developed as the block structure. The blocks they have a tendency to be regular rectangular blocks, but that's not always like that, because Kyiv is built on many hills, and also Kyiv is being built for a very long time. So the streets, they develop themselves. However, still, Kyiv has this tendency to have this regular block. Like here, you see. The blocks are different in size. The Kyiv is not like New York or Barcelona. They're different in size, but they're more or less in one module. So the minimum width of a block is 150 meters. And this width, it wasn't dictated by a plan, actually. It was just dictated by how people made their paths in the old city and how they built their houses. And then, of course, after some time, it was organized by a city planner, obviously. But most streets of Kyiv center are historic streets, meaning they were not built by an architect, they were built by people who walked there. What you can also see in this picture that unlike, for example, Vilnius, And unlike many other cities in Western Europe, we have an open block structure in Kyiv, meaning that if you would walk in a typical Western city, you would see this monolith facade of buildings, one building standing straight to another and making this wall of a street, which you cannot actually penetrate. You cannot usually go inside the block unless it's permitted specifically, but usually in a normal residential street, you wouldn't see inside the block. Kyiv is different. We have open blocks, always had them like that. So when you're walking through Kyiv, you can see a local because he would go through the blocks. He knows shorter passes and knows how to cut corners, because in Kyiv you can walk mostly through any block. They're not closed for pedestrians or even cars. This is the other historical part of Kyiv called Podil. It's the lower part of the city near the river. So because it's built on a plain, the block system is more regular here. You see more rectangular blocks, less diagonal streets. Also the same size of block, like 150 meters would be the minimum module for it. And that's how Kyiv was built, mostly during 18th, 19th century, when actually most of the center part was developed. This is the other neighborhood. This is already built in Soviet times. After the war, started in 40s and 50s. But what you can see here that still this block structure is used. Actually, why it's like that, and you can see it all over Soviet cities of that time. Like in the 1920s, 1930s, the architectural society of Soviet Union was quite avant-garde and progressive and modernistic. As you know, there were a lot of avant-garde constructivist projects in USSR, but somehow, and I think this was just a question of personal taste, they fell out of favor of Stalin. Stalin was a big lover of classicism. We even have this term of classicism, of Stalin classicism and Stalin's Baroque in Kyiv. So when Kyiv was rapidly developing, and that was in 1940s, 1950s, right after the World War II, all the modernist avant-garde ideas were put aside, and Kyiv was developed in a classical way. So this is actually the picture of a neighborhood where I live. It's one of the latest neighborhoods in Kyiv built in this classic rectangular block system. I would show you my house on this image, but you don't see my mouse, but it's somewhere here on the lower right part. They already, because it was completely new build, they already decided to make a new standard for a block size. They made it a little bit bigger, 200 by 250 meters. And you should understand this block is much bigger than a normal block in a Western European city. This is because we have this a little bit different block, it's open, so there are some houses inside of the block. For example, you can walk inside the block and there will be a school there. This is how it looked when it was built. Yeah, and you would think that developing Soviet cities would go on like that, but then Stalin died. Maybe something else happened, and somehow everybody recalled this guy to their memory, who is Le Corbusier. and his idea of garden cities. These ideas of garden cities were developed by him in 1920s, 1930s. Not widely accepted at that time, but after the World War II, with the rise of some socialist countries, they were recalled again. And one of the most famous cities built in that way is the city of Brasilia in Brazil, the capital of Brazil now, developed by Luis Costa and Oscar Niemeyer. That's how it looks. So if you try to understand what a garden city paradigm is, you should think, they thought like that. The Corbusier's idea was like that, this rectangular block structure is completely inhuman and was narrated to human by the capitalist society and is completely wrong to live in. What a person should live in is the garden, a vast garden with a lot of free space, with just separate, beautiful buildings standing here and there. But the main theme is, of course, this garden where you walk freely from building to building, being still in this big part of nature. But that's still a city. And actually, when you hear this idea, there's nothing wrong about it. It actually sounds quite beautiful. And socialist architectures in USSR were really happy to use this idea, because of course for architects this idea is fantastic. You know, architects always have this kind of a god complex. They see everything from above. They mostly work with plans. So when this city development paradigm in USSR shifted from classical block structure to this free planning, to this garden city idea, all the Soviet architects were really excited, because now you could do something like that. Instead of working with boring rectangular blocks and just filling them with buildings, you could make the compositions of all sizes, colors, and whatever you want. You could choose your new measurements for a block, or it's not a block here now, of course. You get this microrayon, this micro district between the streets. So for example, this is a picture of Obolon district in Ukraine, which was developed in 70s and 80s and 90s. So here the distance between two streets is 700 meters, for example. And it may seem actually like quite a good idea. Of course, make why do you need streets everywhere with cars? Make more space between streets, more space for pedestrians. Sounds nice. And also this gives you a chance to develop these you would say more interesting compositions, because now you are not framed with the square block. You can do circle houses, triangular houses, zigzag houses, and show your architectural creativity in every way you want. When I was studying in Architectural Academy in Kyiv 10 years ago, this was still taught to us as like the most progressive and the most up-to-date way to develop a city, actually. These free planning schemes, which were called carpet design. They were actually called carpet city developing design in our courses of city planning. Yeah, and of course, for an architect, it's a fantastic possibility to to reach your creative goals. You are limited by nothing. But what's interesting about this architecture, this style, it's more and more beautiful the higher your viewpoint is. A lot of more sane architectural teachers from my academy said that this is architecture for birds' sake, because birds get a beautiful view of these cities. But the lower you get to the ground, and pedestrians are usually seeing city right from the ground, the more questions start to raise. So this is CHARKIVSKI Masyv. It's 13 square kilometers big. It's 6 times bigger than the district in Vilnius that the exhibition is actually about. So here you get all the same beautiful patterns of houses, which on plans of architects, they definitely looked very creative. Yeah, and as you look at it, you understand that actually it's hard to call it a garden city. Somehow it becomes more like a car parking lot city. Yeah, but that happens a lot. This is a view of CHARKIVSKI Masyv too. When you come to the ground, you understand that you don't see these beautiful plant shapes anymore. You just see that the distance between houses is totally inhuman. When I went to this district to make photos, I thought, okay, I'll park a car in a place where I know, and then I'll walk around and make some pictures from my lectures. And that was not possible, you know? You can only move through this city, through this district with the car, because the distances are just insane. Of course, when a person is asked, what would you like your street to be, narrow or wide? Of course, a person would ask wide. The person likes free space. It's normal, but somehow the logic of life is contradictory to that. And as soon as you go to such a district, you understand that this totally wasn't designed for a human being who walks 5 kilometers an hour. This is one of the main streets of this district, which is photographed a few days ago, and you can only see 2 cars in this picture. But normally, this place should look like this. This is a normal Monday on CHARKIVSKI district. And well, yeah, that's what you get. Free space doesn't come for free. You need to pay for it with a lot of long roads, with a lot of long distances to travel every day, and with any actually transport infrastructure not sufficient enough to for such a city. You know, the CHARKIVSKI district, it inhabits 300,000 people, and it's a monofunctional district. It's called a sleeping rayon, so it's all residential houses. It's a place where people go to sleep in the evening, and in the morning they go to their work, which is usually on the other bank of the river in the city center where all the business activity goes. So every morning and evening on Kharkivsky district looks approximately like this. Here you can see this on the right side of the street. There are these Soviet-style buildings, panelki. The Soviet Union was very proud with its new building technologies, the concrete panels. They were very cheap and efficient way to build a house because they were prefabricated on the factory and then could be easily assembled on site. On the left, you can see the buildings built after the independence of Ukraine, so built during the last 3 decades. And you can see there is not much difference. This is also a view of typical concrete panel house. What's interesting, you can see on the right that they're still using this panel technology there in this district. However, it has proved to have a lot of flaws in it. So what's interesting, you would say, okay, the Soviet Union is over in 1990. So maybe it's time to stop building like this and think it over. But no, it's not. People are still building like this. This Soviet legacy lives on because it's quite an interesting mathematical equation in this, you know. The building such districts in socialist era could be at least proven by the point that all the maintenance of the city was centralized. For example, in Kyiv, the system was like this. There is a district, and then there is like a central, it's called ZHEK. It's a central office for maintaining this district. So people who live in their houses, they wouldn't bother about how clean their yards are or staircases. This was totally not their problem. The Soviet country took care of it on their own. It was the government's responsibility. Everything that is outside your flat was the government's responsibility. But it was Soviet government, you know, where nobody counted money because they were uncountable in this economic system. So nobody really cared how much 1 square meter of a park costs, or 1 extra square meter of the road maintenance costs. There were also those older Soviet standards of how many cars there are in a family. And those were really predictable because in Soviet Union, there were not enough cars for everybody. There was like a huge line for a car, which a person could like enter this line in his 20s and then get a car in his 40s. So wait for like 20 years for a car. So the government could quite well predict how many cars there will be on the streets. Therefore, parking lots were not such an issue. Of course, there will be like 5 cars in the house, so they find a place to park. But then Soviet Union disappears, and here comes capitalism. And capitalist developers see these existing existing situation is like a very like a market with great opportunities, because you have this maintained pattern of how you build this district. You have almost zero limitations about the height of the house, about the distance between the houses, and you have this post-Soviet city regulations that prescribe that there should be like one car for like 20 people living. And that allows you to build really high houses, really close, without building any parkings and without investing any money in the surroundings. Because the surroundings now belong to nobody, actually. The tenants of the houses don't take care of them, but the government also doesn't have a budget to take care of them. So you receive this district with a super high density. And everybody knows it's insane to continue building it like that. But the market says otherwise. The market says that it's actually very efficient to continue building it like that. Ukraine is quite a centralized country. So every year, more and more people come to Kyjive. City is growing rapidly. And there is quite a high demand for new apartments. So they continue to be built like this. Yeah, so now you come to a district where there is a wall, just walls of apartments. Like, look at this building on the screen, like it's 20 stories high and at least 20 apartments on each level. So like 400 apartments, 400 families live here. There are parts of the district where you cannot actually see through. You don't have any perspective because there is the house after a house after a house. This is a situation downstairs in the beautiful garden city of the future. There are so many cars, there is actually no place for this garden. And you cannot blame people, because with these proportions of the streets and houses, and with no jobs around because the district is monofunctional, you have to buy a car to get anywhere. So it has to look like this. Yeah, both in 1980s and in 2030s, the developers are not really creative about the architecture itself. It's really the cheaper the better. So yeah, now it looks like this. 1/10 of Kyiv population lives in this district. And every day they spend 2 hours at least on their way to their job and back. What's funny about this district is, despite this, you would say, quote, progressive urban development design, the church's design is very orthodox. I wanted to call this picture like expectations and reality. On the left is a church in New York, and on the right is a church in CHARKIVSKO district. But I decided that's quite a cheap joke to do. But I told it to you anyway. So yeah, this is it's just interesting how it looks on the contrast to the building development these churches. And there's a lot of them. If you Google churches in Kharkivsky district, there will be like more than 10. And somehow they are all this Russian Orthodox style churches in the middle of the concrete jungle. Yeah, the quality of designs of both churches and buildings has a lot of questions to it. So yeah, instead of a garden city, you get a city where this is, on this photo, is the only garden it has, actually. It's the only park in the Pozniki district. And you can feel that this whole idea of garden city didn't work out as it sounded. You have so not much gardens, a lot of city, a lot of traffic, which is understandable because this is how this urban design dictates the transport infrastructure. You get parking in all the yards, and you get this crazy density of high-rise building. It's all you can see around. So yeah, I think that's basically it. That's the Kharkiv district as it is. I think I'm ready to answer questions if there are some.
Perfect. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you, Volodymyr, for such an interesting presentation and a very visual one. Yeah, maybe let's start with a very simple, let's say, question of, because I was wondering, is this area still a growing one? Is it still being, built? I mean, probably not now, but.
Yeah, it's been built really, really fast. So, because there is nothing to stop this. This kind of development doesn't grow naturally. It just grows whenever there is free space, and of course there is still free space around Kyiv. There are fields. This whole area was built in a desert. Actually, it was just this field, which was very low. It was flooded by the river a lot, but they raised the level of this field with sand, and this whole area was built in during the last 40 years, starting in 1980s. And as you can see from the pictures, it's being built still. Even during the war, some projects are under construction.
And then I was also wondering, is there anything, that you can describe the, I don't know how to say, maybe socioeconomic, demographic perspective of this area, or is it there is no such kind of features that kind of unite the?
Actually, out of let's say 5 or 6 huge sleeping districts like that, this one is considered quite a good one. People try to buy there, and the real estate prices there are quite high. The only reason why that is so, I guess, is there is a metro line there. So in this whole district, there are 5 metro stations, and it's quite an advantage. But still, from the most parts of the district, you need to take a bus to get to the metro station.
And then we have also a question about the pedestrian or bicycle infrastructure, if there is one, and what had been the state of it prior to the war, and were there any plans regarding bicycle tracks and similar kind of infrastructure more friendly to pedestrians, let's say?
Yeah, there is actually. The pedestrian infrastructure is, you would say it's okay, right? There's a lot of pedestrian paths, and as I said, there is like no blocked spaces, so you can walk all around. The bicycle infrastructure in Kyiv is actually being built quite actively for the last few years. But you need to understand that this district is huge itself, but the distance from this district to the places of interest in Kyiv is just enormous, even from like for a professional cyclist. The Kyiv city itself is like that, you know, because of this really huge river in the middle. It's very spread apart from left to right. So like a trip from this district to the city center is like 30 kilometers.
I see.
Yeah.
And then also it would be interesting to hear if there were there any attempts to somehow humanize the district or make it more livable, let's say community-driven initiatives, or yeah, to make it more human-friendly.
Well, yeah, to be fair, you need to say that there are some. Actually, most of them are pointed on at least stopping to develop in the district even more, to build in more and more high-rises, to spreading it wider. And also, right now, the district is. I'll show it on the slide. So there is a big lake on the right that you can see. Yeah, and the developer's plan is to fill this lake with sand and to build there one more part of the district, because of course that's their business. They want to build. So most public initiatives right now are to at least stop the developing, slow it down. There haven't been any yet, at least any effective ones, how to make it more human. But it is also, as I think, it is hard to be done by this kind of initiatives. Well, actually, it can be done, yes. I think the main thing that should be done here, the most effective way to somehow make it more human, is to start adding more function here. Make it not a sleeping district, to leave this term a sleeping district in the past. Bring more workplaces here, build more, for example, turn part of this residential houses into office buildings. So people wouldn't have to travel so much, wouldn't have to travel all around the city to get to their job and back home, make more workspaces here.
And
So,
as such, sorry to interrupt, but as such initiatives present, are there any attempts to actually make it more of a more functional, as you say?
well, at least architects are starting to talk about it and starting to talk that these initiatives are needed. Nothing yet has been done actually on a big scale. Of course, like Ukrainians are very entrepreneurial, I would say. So whenever there is there is an option to make some company office in the flat, they would do that. And so some like really small private initiatives start to appear there, but it's not because people want to somehow change the life course of the district. It's just because this happens. Like,
I see.
Some entrepreneurs, of course, they get there, they start doing something there, but it's not on that scale that it would change this topography of the district itself.
And then perhaps you partly touched it already, but how to transform this monster into more or less comfortable place for living? This is a comment from the Facebook broadcast.
Well, as I said, yeah, you need to understand that like even the best bicycle path to the city center won't solve the problem. It's just impossible to make a person ride 30 kilometers on a bike uphill in winter in Kyiv. Yeah, I think the up-to-date tendency in any urban development is to make it as multifunctional, as independent as possible, because it already has the size of a small city right there. So just I think that the government's job here is make better conditions for more and more businesses to appear here, for more and more functions to appear in this district. Maybe it's even needed to make a quota for how many percent of the land can be built with residential development. So there will be some percentage for other functions in this district too.
And also, I don't know if you can maybe tell how many district or residential areas are there in Kyiv, which have been built prior to the Soviet occupation. How many districts have been built after the Soviet times, to sort of have an idea?
It's a good question. Hard to say, because a lot of districts were, of course, started many years ago and then developed in Soviet times. But there is like, if you see the map of Kyiv as a whole, yeah, the central area was built in 18th, 19th century. Everything around it was actually built in Soviet times. So I could name like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 districts of the similar size as this one, which were developed during Soviet times.
And yeah, thank you. And then also I will read one comment from the comment section. Thank you for the interesting presentation. I was wondering about the levels of personal safety, in particular women, in such kind of district where there are no shops, cafes, local enterprises to make its streets alive.
Yeah, that's also a question. You know, that's actually not so bad, the situation there. In 1990s, it was horrible. There were some districts like that there were like, there are still jokes, you know, when there is a district called Troyeshina. It's legendary. It's in the northern part of Kyiv. All my childhood, it was like a forbidden zone, like a total ghetto where you would never go, especially alone. It was dangerous all day long there, especially at night. There was even a joke, because when Russians started to invade Kyiv and they went there, there was a meme like, don't you know you can't go to Troyeshina at night? It's too dangerous. But as I said, Ukrainians are really entrepreneurs. In this district of Charkivsky, all the first floors are partially legally, partially illegally turned into shops, hairdressers, and things like that. There was no place built for it, but people just want to start their small business, so they buy a flat on the first floor and they illegally turn it to something. So, and the other entrepreneurial character of Ukrainians, they really like to work very late. So a lot of the shops are open late. So even if you come to this Kharkivsky district late at night, you will see a lot of open doors and a lot of light on the first floors of the district. At least there is totally no such statistic that this district is dangerous for pedestrians. You should also understand that there is always a lot of people on this there, like up to 11 o'clock. There is just so many people living there that there is always a lot of people on the streets. So yeah, somehow safety-wise, this is quite appears not to be a problem.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Even the other way around, the older districts which have lower houses, less density of population, they appear to be more dangerous at night, because in the evening there is much less shops working on the street, much less people walking around.
Mm-hmm. And then it was very interesting when you talked about this public-private space divide, and I was wondering if you think that this kind of sense of ownership of the public spaces, is it somehow changing, developing, you would say, or I don't know if there are some kind of signs of people taking more active roles in their environments that.
You see, that's the problem. For example, if you take some Western city with a closed block structure, it would be a complete opposite of what we have here. So there is a street. The street is usually quite narrow, and there is some space in the courtyard of the house, which is usually also not so big, which makes it possible for the people of the house to maintain this space with their own hands, with their own resources. It doesn't take you so much resources to maintain like the garden inside some Berlin house, for example. Here, it's this beautiful garden city. You walk out of the door of your house, and you don't know where does the territory of your house ends and the territory of the other house begins. So, as I said, like this is, as I would say, it's Soviet hardware for modern day software. It's totally uncompatible, and it's even hard to say how it can be changed. Because the structure itself doesn't give you an opportunity to understand, if you even want to like feel that this is your yard and you can invest your resources and your time into developing it somehow. There is, first of all, you don't know where it ends. Second, it's open for everybody, so there is no guarantee that your work wouldn't be damaged by someone. So yeah, that's why it's hard to make it better with private initiatives now. You know, it's already developed too far away from the state when just the owners of apartments could somehow develop the territory of the districts themselves.
Mm-hmm. And thank you. And then another question, what is your opinion on socialist panelki buildings and the idea of panelki as heritage? We had another presentation a week ago. It was by Dmytro Solovyov, a proponent of this idea. It would be interesting to hear what is your take.
Well, from the point of view of an architect, the idea of panelki is a beautiful idea. It's efficient way to build houses very quick and cheap. And I think inside every architect, there is this child who likes to build with Legos. So when these Legos appear in real life, of course, it's very tempting to use it everywhere. But the practice of using them, if you have ever been to this house made of panelkis, you would understand all the flaws that come at the cost of this cheap and fast building. I totally agree that they can be counted as heritage. There is certain aesthetics in that. There was a lot of thought already invested into these projects of building with prefabricated models. And of course, the history of building prefabricated houses, I think, is just starting. Since the Soviet time, there was a lot of development in that direction. And many flaws of Soviet panel houses were overridden by time and technology. So yeah, I think some of them should be preserved. Of course, it's totally would be wrong to have a plan to destroy them all and replace them all, because they are quite an interesting engineering idea of their era. But you should also understand that living in this house is quite a challenge. It's really not soundproof or weatherproof. It's really cold in winter, really hot in summer there. And if you start implying some modern day warm saving technologies, you totally destroy this outer look of the panelka. So yeah, I think they should be left as monuments in some places. This is quite a subject in architecture, but of course, I would totally say building more houses like that with those old technologies from 1980s, which still goes on in Kharkivsky district, I would say it's totally wrong to do that. The new, actually, we would never think about it somehow, but also like the panel house is very unstable to missile attacks, which of course we didn't suppose would happen in 21st century Kyiv, but they happen. And yeah, this panel building is the worst type of building to be in during a missile attack, because it's very dependent on each panel inside. If one of them is destroyed, it's very likely that the others will fall down like a card house.
Yeah, thank you for your perspective. And it's interesting, especially given the current situation. I think I don't see any more comments there. Perhaps one last question from me. I was wondering if there are alternative sort of urban building architecture ideas currently developed in, or simultaneously developed in Kyiv, or this kind of style is a dominating one, or
no, that's very interesting actually, because through like last 20 years you can see how the architectural thought on city development developed itself and then made a full circle in the end. Because why these buildings continued to appear after the independence? Because we had the same architects actually who were building them yesterday in Soviet Union, and in 1991 they didn't all at once get any new ideas. They just continued building as they knew it. So for the first decade there was this. Then part of people, especially people who are paying extra money to live in some better residential complex, they would be not satisfied with this thing that you are buying a house, you're buying a flat in a new house, and then all the strangers can trespass near your windows. So they started building a lot of closed territory residential areas. So it's like, imagine part of this CHARKIVSKO Masyv, but it's also surrounded by a fence with the block posts and security guards on each entrance. And that gave people some feeling of security, but at the same time, it totally cut them off from the whole pattern of the city. So in such a residential complex, it's even hard for a person to open a business. Even there is like a place to open a business, but it's really strange to do that because the territory is closed and you can only count on the local residents. You cannot count on somebody coming from outside. And so the second decade of our independence was the decade of this closed territory residential complexes. And now one of the, I would say, most human residential complexes which is being built in Kyiv came back to this closed block structure of a normal European city. They are just building closed blocks where people have their private territory inside the block, which cannot be where nobody can enter from outside, but still on the outside of the building, it's part of the live street, and there are shops, cafes, and everybody from around can go there. So yeah, I think people are trying to invent the bicycle. They spent 100 years on that, and then they come back to that actually quite perfect solution that they had in the very beginning and start building that again.
Interesting observation. So yeah, I think the questions came to an end and the time as well. So I would like to thank you, Volodymyr, for your presentation and such an interesting and rich lecture, and a lot of things to think about. And of course, all the support from Vilnius, from Lithuania, goes to you and to Ukraine. And yeah, sending our best wishes and love from here.
Thank you once again. It means really a lot to us. Thanks for inviting me for this lecture. Hope the story about the boring district wasn't too boring.
Not at all. It was very interesting. Thanks again, and I think we can finish the broadcast. So thank you everyone who joined, and yeah, see you.
Have a good evening.
Further events.
Bye.